Most Hollywood child stars fall from innocence to infamy, but this actress did the opposite. She followed her fame all the way to becoming an Orthodox Jew? She didn't just blossom, she bloomed into a full-on neuroscientist, 4-time Emmy nominee, best-selling author, hit podcaster, and one of the world's loudest and proudest Jewish celebrities. But has it come at a cost? Let's find out. She's Mayim Bialik, I'm Jonah Platt, and this is Being Jewish. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Wondering Jews with Michal and Noam, an Unpacked podcast. Start watching or listening at unpacked.bio/WJ. Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to Being Jewish, your home for deeply candid conversations on Jewish identity, culture, current events, and more. I'm your host, Jonah Platt, and today I'm joined in studio by none other than the real awesome blossom herself, Miss Mayim Bialik. Mayim, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
Mayim.
It.
Hey, Mayim, bestselling. Do people just sing that at you all the time?
When I was a kid, indeed, that is my name is the same as the song.
Yes, well, welcome.
Thank
it's a
you.
pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
You have many career accomplishments, of course, which many people are well aware of, but I have so much respect, in addition to all that, for how openly Jewish you live your life, which shouldn't be the exception, but often is. Is that something you have ever thought to yourself and decided to do? Is there like a gauge to what you show and what you don't? Or is that I'm just me being me?
The easy answer is it's a little bit just me being me. But I think, as you well know, the mediums that we can engage with have, I think, changed the way a lot of us present ourselves. So, when I was on Blossom, I was 14 to 19. There was no social media.
Right.
There were no smartphones. Like even having a publicist was something that a lot of people didn't have if they were actors. It was a very different world. By the time I got to Big Bang Theory, which was, many years later, almost 20 years later, it was a completely different landscape. And by then I had been writing for Fowler. I had been mommy blogging is what we used to call it, but also writing a lot about Jewish identity, Jewish observance. At that time I was quite observant. And so I would write in particular about a lot of, what observance means, especially for a modern lens. But once social media became a thing, I think the question was, how much of yourself do you show? Maybe it was naivete. I did not think that there would be a problem with me showing that these are the holidays I celebrate, or this is what I do. And apparently what I was opening myself up to was, an internet that became a reflection, of a lot of the places in society that were still not comfortable with Jews being Jewish, no matter their observance, political persuasion, belief system, it didn't really matter. And that was long before October 7th, for sure.
Sure. When you first sort of felt that, there's this increased exposure, and now you're getting, when it sounds like you're getting some negative online
threats,
how does that alter your behavior?
I guess it doesn't.
Baruch Hashem.
It alters my sense of safety, not just my personal safety, but my sense of safety in the world. I think that's kind of undeniable. And it also, echoed a lot of the fears that many of us were happy to discard, that we inherited from our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents. Many of us wanted to push aside this notion that we are other. Yeah. Look how assimilated we are. And indeed we are, and through all of our history, we have survived by adapting just enough,
right,
and maintaining just enough to sort of have that tension, be palpable. It changed when I was first protested against, long before October 7th.
Protested in what way?
I was giving a talk in, I believe it was in Ohio, Cincinnati. I was speaking at a secular university with a secular topic. And it came to our attention that there was a group of anti-Israel activists. Yeah. I don't know what the moniker was, but I remember that I was shown the flyers that were being distributed to encourage this protest to happen. And the flyers said a very simple and confusing sentence. It said, Mayim Bialik is a Zionist. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why would that because to be protested.
They know me so well.
Right. And I remember there was that confusion. And, in hindsight, it's very kind of clear it was, part of this Zionism is racism, campaign. And yeah, during my talk, this group stormed into the auditorium. And this was like a 1,000-person theater. It was a large theater with flags and screaming and this, that. And the police had to remove them. And this was 15 years ago.
Wow.
This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
That changed my requirements for security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely caused some sort of destabilization of comfort, right?
Totally.
That many of us, have kind of been used to being used to. But it also really pissed me off. Like, you're not allowed to use Zionism as a slur because it's not. I mean, at least the last time I checked,
right.
It's a definition of, someone who believes in an autonomous and free state of Israel, with secure borders and with safety as our historic, spiritual, literal, and figurative homeland. That says nothing about politics, says nothing about how I feel about a 2-state solution, a 3-state solution, the treatment of Palestinians and God. Like, it says nothing about that. And
right.
And again, this could be my naivete, which apparently, many on the extreme left, I would say, and I guess the extreme right, have redefined Zionism
right.
to be something that, again, I did not think that it was 15 years ago, and certainly not now.
Yeah, I don't think that's a naivete. I think that's just people co-opting a word and calling it something else.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to fully understand if you've never experienced the shitty feeling it is to be protested or harassed or like any of that stuff. Like, I'm a pretty tough cookie. You seem like a pretty tough cookie. It's not fun. It really doesn't feel great.
It's an understatement. Like, it doesn't feel good, not to the point that I would be like, you shouldn't do that. It doesn't feel good, but it's disturbing.
Yeah.
I experienced this when I was at UCLA. So I'm 50 now.
As a student.
As an undergrad. And this was the beginnings of what became the Zionism equals racism, movement. So
that's somewhat unusual. I mean, most of the guests who I've had on the show, even of 50s and above, have been, when I was in college, it was a totally different landscape.
No, I went to UCLA. So I'm 50 years old now. I entered UCLA at 19. That's 30 years ago. Wow. And in the 5 years that I was an undergrad there, we went from having positive interactions with all of the other minority groups on campus, the Latino, Chicano organization, the African Student Union, all of the, Asian American, Pacific Islander groups. We had positive relationships with all of them. And by the end of the 5 years there, they had been encouraged to sign an anti-Zionism charter.
Wow.
This was in the 90s, the late 90s.
That's early.
Early 2000s. There were swastikas painted on Bruin Walk during our Yom Ha'atzmaut week that we were, scrubbing off. Rabin equals Hitler was chalked all over Bruin Walk. And it was the beginning. What we now see was, I believe, a global campaign of basically, intellectual hijacking of the university system. We went from being able to converse as students and academics to not being able to speak at all. And this notion of non-engagement, which is not the approach that I take, that's what is the most disturbing. Being shouted down, this is a new phenomenon. So it's not just being protested, right? It's being shouted down with anger, with aggression, with threats of violence in a way that there is no conversation. That, I think, is what's most alarming about whatever movement this is that is so actively seeking to engage in protest.
I mean, it's certainly something we've talked about on the show before, how, anti-Zionism is a hate movement, and it's not interested in a conversation. It's not actually interested in solutions.
Correct.
It wants to shut down one side and ostracize them and other them and in certain ways get rid of them entirely.
Well, and look, we've had many opportunities, even in our lifetime, to see, what happens when people don't agree about something? How do we talk about it? Mm-hmm. So we've seen this with Black Lives Matter. We've seen it with the LGBTQIA++ movement, right? We've seen it with even with the trans community. What does it look like if, let's say, someone doesn't agree, but how do we have dialogue, right? And it's not done perfectly, but for some reason, this situation and this conflict seems to be one that is above conversation, right? It's so...
Or below, perhaps.
Or below. That's true. Depending which side of it you're on.
Right. So your name obviously is Mayim.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've had to explain your Jewishness your whole life?
It's funny. I don't know that I would have thought of it like that. I've had the opportunity to identify as Jewish every single time someone doesn't understand my name.
Yeah.
And there's not a situation I've been in where anyone has guessed the pronunciation of my name correctly. Like my whole life. Once I became, I guess, more of a public person, maybe.
Right.
But every single time someone has made a comment or asked about my name, I've had the opportunity to say it's Hebrew for water. My name means water in Hebrew, right?
Mm-hmm. And then what's the most common follow-up?
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, that's interesting.
We love that.
Yeah, we love that.
You have a quote that I loved. You once said, "There is nothing worth fighting for that is more important than the legitimacy of the Jewish people and the existence of the State of Israel." First of all, I think we got to get everybody to sign that pledge. I mean, let's pass that around. You are a neuroscientist. You host a podcast, Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, talk a lot about mental health and different things like that. What is the disconnect between, from your point of view, the stakes of that statement, which are so existential and urgent and important, and what's the chasm there between other people deciding to act on it when the stakes are so high? I mean, what do you see there?
It's a great question, but it's one that you could ask about many different aspects. I mean, not just of like human existing, but of Jewish identity, right? Because I've heard people say that there's nothing more, right, important, critical, and prescient than being religious, right? Which I don't think is true. It may be true for some people. But I think at this point in time, so much of our Jewish identity and the Jewish identity of our children and our people, you know, is dependent on how we respond to a global attack on our legitimacy. And, you know, I think that what social media and TikTok misses is that there's an academic practice of examining anti-Semitism, just like there's an academic practice of examining systemic racism,
right?
You know, or the variety of injustices that are done all over the world and have been for thousands of years. This is not a group of Jews coming up with an idea that they hate us. You know, there's an academic tradition.
I'm almost done with my master's in anti-Semitism studies.
Right, well, that you can even get a master's in it.
There you go, yeah.
So, you know, to be able to frame that takes more than 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
There's a very systematic procedure that many people all over the world have spent and dedicated their lives to perpetrating. And that is delegitimization and all of the things that happen, questioning our peoplehood, questioning our right to statehood, our right to self-defense. Those are tropes, you know, and they're tropes for a reason.
I'm interested in sort of what you see as the disconnect for Jews who might think this, what you said. I agree that fighting for Jewish identity is so important, but, you know, I gotta watch this TV show, you know, I gotta go to the grocery store.
I think it takes all kinds, and I think we're called for different things at different times.
But this is the time, right?
Well, this is the time, and people do exactly what they're able to. Mm-hmm. And I don't presume to judge because I don't know what the rest of the capacities are of any individual. And the fact is, you know, there's a lot of things that happened in my heart, in my mind after October 7th that I don't share and that I didn't share with people. And in some cases, those may have prevented me from acting fully in ways that I wanted to, right? Maybe there was an event I wanted to go to, but I couldn't. Maybe my fear was too great. Maybe my anxiety about what it would mean to confront this global threat, maybe it's too much. And I give people the right to be in denial because it's a powerful tool that people hold on to when what's on the other side might be too overwhelming or scary. You know, why are there Jews who turn on us, you know, turn on their own people? Different question, and I think has a different, you know, set of framework around it.
They're almost more understandable to me because they at least have an agenda that they're working off of, you know, I don't agree with this statement.
Right.
And so what I think is the most important thing is my progressive values.
It's not, it's not apathy. And yeah.
And as opposed to someone who says, yes, I agree, this is a really critical time. I'm not going to really contribute to it
Yeah,
right now.
and to me, and again, this could just be my bleeding heart liberal side, right? To me, there may be more, right, to that. And like I said, it kind of takes all kinds. I pick up trash when I see it.
Me too.
In places, right? I wish everyone would do that. To me, it's like one of the easiest things to do.
Yep.
It's one of the easiest things to do. You can literally make the world a better place by leaving it with less trash than you entered it. And you don't have to clean up the whole world, right? Lo alechem lecha ligmor. You don't have to finish the job, but like you could do that. I don't think you get to rank, the planet versus like it takes all kinds. And I think also, the more we can have opportunities for us to feel united, I think is going to be like the building,
I
that
agree
we
with
get
that.
to do.
But
I love that you're hostile towards people who are apathetic.
I'm not hostile. I mean, what I challenge people to,
Sure.
because I believe everyone is capable of contributing in their own way. I'm not saying everybody's got to come out there and be shouting from the treetops.
And I think one thing that I see, it's just before apathy. It's like, it's important, but someone else will handle it.
Yeah.
Right? That definitely gets my goat, because if you think it is important to the level that we're talking, then I do think you have to be willing to stand up for, and to sacrifice. Yeah. And I also, understand that some people feel the need to hide. Some people feel the need to take off their kippas now.
Yeah.
Someone literally said to me the other day, he was not Jewish, "I like your Jewish star. I don't see a lot of them anymore."
Wow.
He said, "My girlfriend's Jewish, but I don't see a lot of them, and I like yours." And I was thinking, what is this world? What is this world?
What an interesting guy that he was observant enough to see many of them before and notice them diminishing.
Correct.
I love this guy.
I know.
All right, here's another quote of yours that I like. "If people are critical of me for being Jewish, or because I visit Israel or believe in the right of Israel to exist, that hurts me a lot." Are you hurt all the time?
I guess so.
I mean, like that's gotta be tough.
I feel like there's gotta be a Yiddish expression, like to hurt is to be a Jew. I definitely think since October 7th, many of us have experienced a level of hurt, that previously was kind of unfathomable.
Yeah.
I think that since October 7th, we've had to think a lot more than we did before about the way we present ourselves and how we talk and where we speak Hebrew and, all these things. Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of grief, and it's collective grief. It is intergenerational grief.
What are your strategies? How do you stay buoyant and hopeful and, deal with the hurt?
I think that there's a new sense of community for the Jewish people.
For sure.
I think that, all of a sudden going to synagogue wasn't just like going to synagogue.
Right.
It was like, I need to be around people who I don't have to explain myself to.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everyone at my synagogue, right? I don't
sure.
always agree with the rabbis. Like, we're allowed to not agree with everybody, right? I wish it didn't take this, but I really felt that. I felt like I need to be held close.
Yeah.
I think also, leaning into Shabbos, leaning into Yom Tovim, like leaning into the things that are good and joyous about us. Mm-hmm. Like, we have a culinary history. We have music. We have dance. We have a calendar that's all our own. It's always been phenomenal to me, but especially to push back on that hurt. Yeah, it's being able to remember the things that don't hurt.
Yeah.
And I think I also felt a really different kind of camaraderie with all kinds of Jews in a way that I never did before.
For sure.
Because I think whatever your denomination or identity is, like, those are your people and you feel comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to explain yourself. I'm not, I used to be. Like, you don't have to do that, right? But what happened for me is, like, after October 7th, we seemed like one.
Yeah.
In a new way. Mm-hmm. And when I would see religious people, where normally I'd be like, I'm not as religious, it was like, what's up? Hey.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what it feels like to be in a community.
Right. One more Mayim quote for you.
Oh, my goodness. It's like this is your life.
All right. This is an older one. You said, Israel is the country I most identify with as mine. Do you still feel that way?
Absolutely.
Great. That's the whole question.
Well, I think it needs like a little bit of fleshing.
Yeah.
Like, this is the country that took me in. I'm a proud American. I'm patriotic in
when
that
you say took me in, you were born here.
I was born here, but I'm saying, like, I would not exist had Ellis Island not moved us through, right?
Yeah.
Moved my grandparents through. One of my grandmothers, she came from Warsaw. She had polio. She had to be, essentially snuck in. Like,
Wow.
She was marked at 3. I'm only here because of that.
Yeah.
And I believe in the values of this country. I believe in the freedoms that many of us hold sacred. I also believe in, the complexity of this country.
Sure.
And that it was not discovered 250 years ago. There have been indigenous people here for most of history. But I believe in the promise that brought my grandparents here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like mine the way Israel does. Israel's mine because that is my homeland. It's the place that I return to in my heart and in my prayers, and I physically return there, and it feels like coming home.
Yeah.
I don't kiss the ground when I land here. I kiss the ground when I land there.
Yeah.
When I leave here, I miss home. When I leave there, that's an eternal longing. Like that's where we've been exiled from for thousands of years. Like I'm in the exile. Like I'm a diaspora Jew. That's mine. This is what took me in. And all over the world, Jews have been taken in, and we've had dozens of dialects that we design wherever they place us. But that's where I've been placed. Yeah. My ancestral primal home is Israel. That's my people.
Would you ever make Aliyah?
I thought of making Aliyah more than twice. At this point, my life is here because of my kids, my mom. I mean, I've tried several ways. I'm happy to pay taxes and be considered a citizen. I just don't know that I can live there right now, right? And there are certain requirements. So, if anyone from the Israeli government wants to take my money, I'm happy to pay taxes.
Let's go. Let's get her in.
I feel like we should get me in. Like, wouldn't that be?
It'd be the biggest win for Israel in 3 years.
I already feel like a citizen, right? Yeah.
So a few weeks after October 7th, you recorded this 9+ minute TikTok video.
Is that how long it was?
Yeah. Really just speaking off the cuff, it seems, speaking your truth. Yeah. Millions of views. Yep. What, if you can recall, felt so urgent in that moment that you're like, I got to go put this on the internet? And what was the response that you got from that?
Gentiles. I wanted non-Jewish people to understand what it felt like to be Jewish right now. That was really what it was, because we're a very small percentage of this country. We're like the Amish. And if you live in a city, I know you think we're everywhere.
Maybe not this audience.
Right. No, but I'm saying if other people hear this, a lot of people who are my favorite thing to do is to ask a Gentile how many Jews they think are, especially if they live in New York or if they live, in any large city. I've heard people say I think 50%.
No.
So,
2.
Right. What I was driven by, was wondering what it must be like for, even the sweet Gentiles, right? Yeah. To be walking around the world after October 7 and be like, what the is happening? What happened there? What happened in this far off place that I've never been to and maybe can't even find on a map? Yeah. But what's happening with all these Jews? That's really what I felt motivated to explain, not as a defense, not as let me explain. It was just if you're curious what it feels like, this is what it feels like. And that was just my experience, but I also know that it resonated with a lot of people, probably because we're all very similar, because we're a people. We're a tribe, and we share a lot of things. We share a heart.
Did you receive response from the audience you were trying to reach?
Mostly I heard and hear from Jews. A lot of Jews felt really seen and heard. And obviously I don't need to shout in a matchbox, which is a lot of, I think, what you and I and people like us end up doing, right? We end up speaking to people who get it, right?
Right.
But I know that people shared it. I know that they shared it with other people.
Yeah.
And people told me that they would share that with people to say this.
Right.
This is how I'm feeling. This lady, articulated it. This lady from TV, she's feeling it too.
You've called being a liberal Zionist, I guess I have more quotes. You've called being a liberal Zionist a strange intersection. How's that going for you these days?
What I've discovered is that I cannot, be asked to choose between being a liberal and being a Zionist. I think that every term and all of the nomenclature that many of us used to use, especially if we are, liberals or Democrats, right?
Right.
None of that seems relevant anymore. I've had, so many people laugh in my face when I say, like, I used to be a progressive. That's what they called us.
Yeah.
And I think the part of that is that this spectrum on both ends has been pulled so far that it's just a circle.
Totally.
It's like a messed up circle. So I don't identify, with many politics of the far left. I mean,
Sure.
And I don't identify with many of the things that the Democratic Party has chosen to prioritize, not just for the Israel reason or the Jewish reason. I think many of us feel very confused about our identity as Democrats because I think the Democratic Party has really let a lot of us down, and saying that, earned me accusations of being a Republican in my own home, right? Which there's nothing wrong if people want to be Republicans. But I'm saying the fact that that's how polarized it got.
Right.
That if
It's
you
so
questioned,
binary.
right, that if you questioned what's going on in the Democratic Party, all of a sudden there's only one solution. That means you're a Republican. Right. No, I got a lot of other choices in between, So for me, the principles of liberalism hold true no matter what. I believe in upholding the fallen and healing the sick. I do, I'm okay with also living in a country where some people believe in the welfare system and some people don't. Like, I was raised to understand that people have differences of opinion. We don't go shooting each other in the street about it, right? So none of that has changed for me. I believe in many of the policies surrounding, legalization of drugs, of prostitution. I'm a liberal. I will never believe in the death penalty. Like, you cannot get me to change. However, this notion that support for Israel is in conflict with the Democratic Party is fallacious, and it's, it's sinful, right? Yeah. It's sinful. And in addition, whatever's going on the other side of the spectrum is, a lot more in line with my, democratic socialist tendencies of like, see, I always knew they were against us. Whatever's happening on those far fringes of the right is also not appreciated. So I feel like we have to get out of that binary, right? Absolutely. And this country is young, and whatever experiment we were doing seems to be revealing that there's something about this, binary system that is not, it's not meeting my needs, certainly, as a liberal Jew. I think that there's a lot of moral ineptitude. I think that it is egregious to treat one minority population with such disdain, hatred, disrespect, and intensity when, if any other minority group received this kind of attention, there would be blood in the streets. And that is the most suspicious aspect of what is going on. And this is what I tell my children. We don't have to agree on everything, but there's something conspicuously suspicious about the attention being paid to Israel.
Yeah.
We've seen it in the United Nations. We're used to that, right? We've seen it in certain fringes of campuses, right? And of organizations. Never, like af pa'amlo, never in my life did I think that any Middle Eastern program, right? Middle Eastern studies program at a university would only have candidates that don't believe in the right of Israel to exist. And never in my life did I think we'd see that, right?
Yeah.
There's something happening here, right? It's the Buffalo Springfield song.
Would you ever run for office?
I can't even get the mail on time. I can't even put on my shoes.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I wear slippers most days now. I mean, look, the way the politics is going now.
We need good people.
Well, clearly anything goes.
Yeah, all you need is a good AI campaign and you're in.
No, I literally, like, on any given day, there's not enough food in the fridge if I forgot to go to the market. You do not want me engaging.
They have people for that.
No, but it's not. I mean, look, I think there's a lot of ways that I can do advocacy and continue to. No, I think that until I can reliably find my keys, my AirPods, and my cell phone, we should not have me taking on any civil responsibility.
You've also said...
Oh my goodness, someone did their research.
Okay, this is literally the last one, though. Jews are often the canary in the coal mine. And that's not, a specific Mayim quote, but you have said that.
Yeah.
If that's true right now, what's the warning? What's coming in the way of the United States if we continue down this road?
There's a group of people who have, perverted their own, religion in many ways to attack people who are not like them. And, radical jihadist individuals do not single out Jews. We are simply the first. We're seen as kind of like the simplest, first attack. But there's no fondness for Christians. Many of us, right, are infidels to a certain, group of individuals. And, it feels necessary to say, this is not about Islam. This is not about the origins of Islam. This is not about the Quran. This is not about individual Muslim people. This is a completely different conversation.
Right.
Right? I am not attacking Islam. I'm not. And, hatred and attacks on Muslim people are horrendous, and we emphatically, categorically, undeniably do not condone that. This is a very, very old and complicated, battle that is being waged not just on Jews, but on, all people who do not believe a certain way. I don't know how many other ways people need to see it. I thought 9/11 was going to be a wake-up call. It was for a couple years, and then everybody forgot. Mm-hmm. That's like, I'm being hyperbolic, but like a little bit, that's kind of what it feels like. That is what we're here to announce, right? This Canary. There's more. It's
a crap job, but I guess somebody's got to do it.
That's your bedtime story,
right?
Jim. Sleep tight.
Thank you. One of the things I love most about podcasting is getting to have conversations that don't pretend to have all the answers. That's probably why I've always enjoyed talking with my friend Noam Weissman. Noam has been on this show, I've been on his, and every time we talk, I walk away thinking a little differently about the world. And that's exactly what you'll find on his other podcast, Wondering Jews, with Michal and Noam, a podcast from Unpacked and Open Door Media. Hosted by my friends Michal Bitton and Noam Weissman, two seriously dynamic Jewish voices, they tackle the big questions about the Jewish experience and about life. They explore what anti-Semitism looks like right now, what the future of Jewish identity might be, how American Judaism is changing, and a whole lot more. Now, what I love most about the show is that it's not about arriving at neatly packaged answers. It's about wondering together. Michal and Noam bring real intellectual honesty to every conversation. They challenge each other, they push back, they keep it curious, and they invite listeners into the process. And it's not just serious, it's joyful. They laugh, they make Judaism feel alive, and they create the kind of conversation that leaves you thinking long after it's over. Search for Wondering Jews with Michal and Noam wherever you listen for your podcasts or watch them. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You have family, a lot of family in Israel. Specifically, you have family that lives in the West Bank area, Judea, Samaria, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
How does having family in this contested area shape your relationship to the situation there? And has that relationship been useful as a vehicle for discussion with other people, or has it been a magnet for people coming after you, or both?
I mean, look, what I learned is that it doesn't matter if I go to the West Bank or Israel proper. Like, haters gonna hate. Right. I've never heard someone say, I would have no problem with you visiting the land of Israel if you wouldn't cross the green line. Like, no one's ever said that to me. It's just not a thing people say.
Right.
Because people who hate that you're in Israel hate that you're in Israel. However, Jews ask me a lot about the West Bank. And I would say that the years that I've spent, in the West Bank and with my family have given me, I think, a more nuanced understanding maybe of the complexity.
Yeah.
I can't.
I would assume so.
Yeah, I can't say that I get it. I can't say that I can explain religious Zionism, to a satisfactory degree. And what I know is I have seen what it was like when that land was given away by Netanyahu many decades ago. And for many families, it was their only opportunity to ever get out of a tiny apartment, right? It was the promise of a home. It was a promise of a different lifestyle, than people who were living in cities, right? It was supported by a government that does a lot of things that I don't agree with. I've also seen it obviously grow. My family lives past Ma'ale Adumim. So most people, when they hear West Bank, they think like, oh, Ma'ale Adumim. Ma'ale Adumim is a very large, over 100,000 people now, city and surrounding area outside of Jerusalem. But there's a lot of West Bank, beyond that. And that is where, I go into. It is complicated. It's become a lot more painful. And it is true that the more you see about what happens at checkpoints, the harder it is to go through one. I will say that. And as I've gotten older, the soldiers look younger.
Well, yeah, funny how that happens.
Yeah, but that's painful too.
Say more about that.
Israel has a very interesting structure, for its military in many ways, Acharai, right? Like our leaders and sergeant, they go first, and the soldiers are behind them.
Right.
Which is like, when people hear that, it's like, oh, that's how we go to war.
Right. Unlike America, which is
correct.
Generals in the back.
Correct. And you send all the kids in, right? And look, it's still war. War is terrible, right? War is horrible. It's not healthy for children and other living things, But yeah, we have generations that I've seen grow, right? I mean, I'm 50 and I've been going to Israel since I was 16. So I've seen my cousins have kids and grandkids. And, I've seen what it's like for young people also to be raised in conflict. Meaning in the same way that we would say the patriarchy affects men as well as women, whatever is going on in Israel, it affects everyone.
Sure.
Meaning it impacts and it erodes trust and love. And, when I think of the God of my understanding, that's a God of love and cohabitation.
Is there anything more you can illuminate for us about life in the West Bank, especially far out there, like that you've seen up close and personal?
When you're on an armed settlement, it's a real bubble, and many settlements, like the one where part of my family lives is an armed settlement, and that means that there's a giant gate and armed soldiers. And then once you're in, those gates close, it's like a bubble. Everything you need, pretty much is there. Like,
so there's no integration.
No.
They're totally separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, this is a good question.
Because some people are like, we go to the same supermarket. We just live in this community, and they go to this community.
So there's different kinds of places in the West Bank, obviously. Sure. If you're on an armed settlement, that's different. And men wear guns to shul, over their talesim. Like that's like a thing that sometimes happens. And it's very hard because I feel like I have to apologize, that people live there. And that's not for me to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place.
Right.
Like, it's beautiful. It's like the desert is thriving, right? It's like there's a supermarket and different minions, and you could go to this minion, you can go to that minion. And like there used to be a Carlbach minion where they only do Carlbach melodies. It's like I've spent so much beautiful time there davening and learning how to cook and watching, my aunt and, just watching what traditional Orthodoxy looks like, right? That's part of my experience there. And, another part of my experience is one of my cousins once said that he was driving by and he was patrolling an area that, was mixed as it were. And he saw a tiny child cowering behind a bush. And the bush was not even very dense. So the boy, it was so clear that he could be seen by anyone. But his fear was such that he was trying to make himself so tiny. And my cousin, who at the time was a soldier, said, it broke his heart. This is what me driving by makes this child do, right? To cower behind a twig, right? It's not even safe. That also, happens. And there are regions of the West Bank that I have driven through that do go through, Arab towns. when I was a teenager and into my 20s, we took buses. And the bus would go from a settlement, where I was staying, through various Arab towns. This was before the second Intifada. And there was always, it's an interesting moment because you're passing through someone else's village and you're stopping and you're picking people up and you're all sharing a bus. But of course, I grew up with these images of buses blowing up, right? And you don't want to be fearful about every person who gets on the bus. That's not a way to live. And yet that is the way that a lot of people live. And I know that the other side of that is what's it like to see a soldier, right? Drive by. That's also terrifying. Like, this is the tension of the West Bank. And there are regions in the West Bank now where there are red signs. That is different. And the red signs say, you cannot enter here. You are not protected if you go here. And those are entrances to certain, Arab villages. And, technically that's for everyone's protection.
Right.
But those red signs are newer. I hadn't seen those before. What the West Bank is like is it's like a lot of human beings. It's a lot of human beings.
What's the feeling of being in a place where they have to carry guns to Shul to protect themselves?
Sure.
And what does that mean in terms of their presence there?
Yeah.
And you sort of can look at it with a little bit of a remove.
That doesn't feel very safe to me. That feels like this is not the world that I want us to build together as humans, Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, because it's not just the West Bank, and this is what I was glad that my children were reminded of when we went in December. Much of Israel is integrated.
Yeah.
Much of Israel is integrated. We once went into a coffee shop in a mall, and we were the only non-Arabs there. We were the only people not speaking Arab. I was the only woman not in hijab. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Right. That's a lot. When you go into a supermarket, when you go buy shoes, when you there's all sorts of people. And that's in many places in Israel, and that's important for people to remember.
Complicated stuff. Speaking of your sons, you've mentioned them a couple times, and you mentioned they're 17 and 20.
Correct.
So they're sort of right in the thick of, high school, college, where it's in this country, it's been sort of the front lines of dealing with anti-Jew sentiment. How have these couple of years been for them?
I decided, after October 7th in particular, to allow them to have their own processing and their own experience. And with that comes a certain amount of anonymity that I grant them because they're not anonymous, right? Meaning I let them have their own experience. And I could write so many amazing articles, I think, about what it's like to parent in this day and age and what's it like when your kid goes to a UC. Apparently those are very difficult places. I made the commitment to my older son, not to be part of any parent advocacy because of my name at the school that he, attends, because he needs to have his own identity. He needs to have his own life. He carries my name. He looks just like me. That's not easy, So there were a lot of meaningful, complicated conversations, obviously, after October 7th. He was a high school senior, my older one at that point. But we also called on, our secular family in Israel to try and have some of these conversations, and we got help. I'm really grateful to my Aunt Judy and my Uncle Elliot.
Shout out Aunt and Unc.
Shout out to, the community of Kibbutz Gezer, right? For being part of what I consider kind of raising my children, in that Israeli kind of consciousness. He has a strong foundation, and also I would add, a very liberal perspective in terms of I want my children to tolerate other people's opinions.
Sure.
I want them to be able to have reasonable conversation, and I also want them to be educated.
Yeah.
And that's what I've said to both of them. You don't have to agree with me, but you also can't make things up, and you can't take things off the interwebs that are not true and use those as evidence. The New York Times can do that, but you cannot.
We got different standards in this house than the New York Times does.
That's right. But post October 7th was when we went to the orientation at my younger son's school, which is a Jewish school. The head of school got up there and he said, I had a whole speech prepared about why you should send your children to Jewish school, he said, and then October 7th happened. And it was like, it's a mic drop.
Right. I don't need to
correct
make any more speeches.
Correct. Because, my goal in sending my child to a Jewish school was so that so that both of them would not be ashamed of being Jewish simply because they're Jewish. And that's a low bar here, people.
Yeah.
Welcome to the world in 2026. I just don't want them to hate themselves because of their ethnic and religious and cultural identity.
Have you been successful?
I wouldn't say that I've been successful. I would say that the Jewish school system is not perfect.
No.
And I also think it's exorbitant. I don't really understand why things have to be so expensive in general. I'm just like a hippie.
Because it's 2 schools in one.
Right, exactly. But
know?
I'm just like a hippie. So I'm like, it's education for everyone to the greatest extent possible. And not everyone obviously is affording Jewish school or has that opportunity. But wherever you're doing it, whether it's at home, whether it's at their public school, whether it's at a Jewish school, whether it's at Sunday school, which, I went to, there needs to be a reinforcement.
Yeah.
Of not just our identity as it relates to a war in Gaza, but we have a calendar, we have an intellectual heritage, we have food, we have music, we have a global language. Imagine that. We have a language that is the unifying language of Jews all over the world. That language is Hebrew, right? That is a fundamental education, right? To learn Hebrew is to learn what it is to be Jewish. So much about the grammar, the way we form things, the way we structure it, which words are regular, which are irregular, which are the ancient words, like the onomatopoeia, the number, right? The numbers that go with words.
Right.
That's like that. We have a language. That's remarkable, so that
Totally.
needs to be reinforced wherever we can.
Love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Hollywood in the post-October 7th landscape. What are you seeing?
I think there's been a lot of remarkable Jews who have stepped up.
I feel that way too, for sure.
And I think I know what everyone's thinking. Most Jews have not. I know that's what most people are thinking, right?
Or it's like Hollywood hates us.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, and I don't know that I'd say that, but I think there's been a lot of remarkable Jews, and you and I could name them, and I'm sure everybody, who's listening could as well. But there's been some exceptional, remarkable Jews, and I want to call out Ben Stiller, who wrote a beautiful piece for Time magazine. I haven't checked in with Ben personally on how he's feeling today, right? But the fact that Ben Stiller wrote a piece for Time magazine saying what is happening when secular, liberal, apolitical Jews are being, attacked. Like, what? I considered that incredibly courageous, right? There have been things like that that have really, touched my soul. Deborah Messing,
We love Deborah.
Jerry Seinfeld and Jessica, even Amy Schumer, who they eventually got to her,
What do you mean?
Yeah, there was a thing and she had an apology and it was like a thing and, and I don't know who the they is, but I'm saying I meant that in a non-threatening way.
Yeah.
But there have been amazing, Sacha Baron Cohen has done some incredible work. There's been an entire behind the scenes, group of mostly women, but men as well, who have protected those of us who speak out. And who were getting silenced literally by platforms. Yeah. So there's been a tremendous showing up, for, I think, in a lot of ways. I think there's also been a real fatigue. And I think there's a fatigue for all of us. I did not want a war, that lasted this long and looked like this. No one did. No one. And I know that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, that was the goal. It's a genocide in Gaza. No, that was not the goal. Right. That's not how that works. And I think that wore out a lot of people in Hollywood. Yeah. Because I think a lot of Hollywood is secular, liberal Jews.
For sure.
And it has become increasingly hard in a liberal climate, especially in Los Angeles and Southern California. It has been hard for many people to maintain that because it's very, very, very painful. Yeah. And so I think there's that. And I think that there's a lot of people who feel like everything Jews touch becomes a problem. I think a lot of people feel that way. And I don't think people would say that, but I think that we're a problem. We're noisy and we're complicated, and we get involved with things that make trouble.
I think you're giving even there a little too much credit. I mean, it's been my experience in certain situations has nothing to do with the people involved themselves. You know, I've talked about this before. I had a situation. I was doing a Shabbat event, and there were certain folks I couldn't even get to come to that because they were just like, too hot right now.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know? And it's like, too hot to go to dinner with Jews?
Yeah.
You know? I'm
look,
not stirring anything up there.
No, but also,
you know?
there's a lot of justifiable reticence, to participation. And this is one of the questions I get asked, by when I speak for Jews, which I do a lot. It's mostly who I speak for. When I go out and about, or I do speaking engagements. Why won't more people speak up? It's very, very clear. You should not be confused. People don't speak up because they don't want death threats. They don't want to have to hire security for their home. They don't want to worry about walking down the street. They don't want to worry about people beating up their kids at school. Like, that's why. Like, that's what it looks like. It's that fear. And sometimes it's justified and sometimes it's not. But you know what? Fear's the same.
How much of that is actually happening, though?
I've seen things happen to Jews in office that are terrifying.
Right.
That's terrifying.
Sure.
To have your house burned down on Pesach?
Right.
That's terrifying. To have red paint splattered all over your car and your driveway? That's terrifying. That happened to like a region of UCLA.
Yeah.
Minutes from here. Like spitting distance. That's terrifying. And you know what? Like my fear that I might be harmed physically, that's a big fear. That's not like, oh, that might happen today. Oh, they might not have coffee at my coffee shop. Like this is a fear of like, what does it mean to leave my house and go to the market right now? I was out with my kids in Hollywood at a really awesome vegan restaurant. And it's just like, it's in a strip mall. And I'm saying like, it's like a dive. It's like an awesome dive.
Sure.
And like most people who are vegan know what I'm talking about. It's like in the middle of Hollywood. And I was there with my kids and we were walking from the, it's in a strip mall.
Right.
So we're walking from the restaurant. It's in the parking lot, just like to our car. And there had been some sort of protest that I did not know about.
Okay.
Because 3 grown adults were wearing, Zionism is racism shirts. And the man of the group started to come up to me. And he did not have a positive look on his face. And I had this moment of like, I'm in this parking lot with my 2 teenagers. What the fuck is about to happen?
Yeah.
Like what? And in that moment, I'm not weighing the statistics. I'm saying to my children, get in the car and do not ask any questions. Get in the car.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is a grown man. I'm a 5'3.5", like old lady, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whose crime is being a Zionist. What are you even entering into my physical space to talk about? Like, what are we doing here? If it was a woman, I'd be like, okay, some lady wants to get in my face. You are a grown-ass man.
Right.
What are you coming up into my physical space in this parking lot to do with that T-shirt and that look on your face?
Yeah.
What's happening? I wasn't at the protest.
What happened? You just
I got in my car and I felt scared.
Yeah.
And my nervous system got dysregulated because that's what happens. And I drove home. And it was quiet in the car.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much my children want to like talk about this, that, and the other, that's scary.
Yeah. It's no way to live.
It's no way to live, and it's the way a lot of us are living, especially if you wear Jew on your face, as I describe it, if you're a public Jew.
Which I think it's important to do.
Yeah.
In spite of it all.
Yep.
2022, you made your directorial debut.
I did.
As They Made Us is the film. Could you get it made now the same way?
It's a good question. So yeah, that I wrote that film a year after my father, Zichrono Livracha, passed away. I wrote a screenplay that I never thought would go anywhere, and I ended up not only getting it made, I directed it, and Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen starred in it. Also Simon Helberg from The Big Bang Theory and Diana Agron.
Is it a Jewish movie?
It's funny, my kids once heard me being asked if every character I play is Jewish, to which I think my then 5-year-old said, well, has to be, because you're Jewish, right? Yeah, I think that it's a Jewishy, it's a Jewish kind of movie. It's not like Bad Shabbos, right? Like it's not about Shabbos. But yeah, it's definitely there. Would I be asked to tone stuff like that down? I don't know. I think that's the beauty of independent film and of funding. But, post October 7th, endorsements changed for me, We lost sponsors on our podcast.
Really?
Speaking engagements changed for me.
Wow.
So yeah, Hollywood, and I'm not the only Jew. Many of us felt that. Many of us felt that. So I think that, yeah, that might change investors. And what I see, and I've seen this in other minority communities as well, is a sort of self-segregation has started happening because we've needed to like join forces.
Right. You find the people who are going to support these things.
But I'd like to say that like that feels dangerous in a country that was, supposed to be, right, a place for everyone to be the same, right?
Do you attribute the sponsorship dropout, things of that nature, to we don't like this Jewish person or we don't like this person talking about Israel? Or is it like they're getting political, I just want to sell washing machines?
At the time that October 7th happened, it was the middle of the writers' strike, the WGA strike at Jeopardy.
Yeah.
And I was let go about 2 months after October 7th. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not going to stand here and say I know why that was. It could have been because the new producer just preferred Ken Jennings. Like, that's completely their prerogative. It's an unfortunate set of timing, and also I've been, as many liberal Jews have been, I have been actively excluded from many prominent liberal organizations.
Wow.
Yeah. Like your voice is no longer welcome here.
Wow.
Uh-huh. And which, like, again, for a bleeding heart liberal, that's a low blow because I marched with a silly hat, I did a lot of marching for a lot of other organizations that I still believe in, I'm not, and I've had Jewish friends who have said like, see, you can't be a liberal. They don't, no, that's not the solution. That's the fabric of a society. The things that hold us together are the different kinds of people who come together to support women, underserved populations, the poor, mental health.
I also have a bone to pick with Jeopardy. I was on it and I came in second.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
And it's really a bone to pick with myself. I brain farted and blew a question I knew the answer to.
I'm terrible at Jeopardy.
It's the damn buzzer.
Well, the buzzer that's part of it.
90% of my anxiousness was on that.
That's definitely right.
As you lost endorsement, sponsorship, whatever, did new ones come out of the woodwork at all from friendlies?
I think there's been, the most positive influx possible of Jewish speakers. So I guess technically less, opportunities because so many incredible people. And that feels so good. To always say yes. Always say yes.
That sound means Mayim just finished answering my 5 deep questions, a bonus segment I write exclusively for members of the Kehillah, my subscriber-only community for my most supportive supporters. Join us, won't you? To get exclusive content, exclusive merch, preferred ticketing to my live events, monthly live FaceTime with yours truly and your fellow Kehillah members, and a lot more. This week's 5 deep questions was a doozy. Here's a little taste. Aliens.
I don't believe we are alone. Those angels, those are actually representations of other beings.
Another thing that's spoken a lot about on your show are near-death experiences.
Where is your consciousness? Does it exist outside of your body? Is it fundamental? Is it something that we learn?
Juicy stuff. You have described yourself as a Baal Teshuva.
Uh-huh.
What is that for those in my audience who don't know, and what led you there?
I'm considered a Baal Teshuva because I was not raised with observance and took on observance when I was, in college. So a Baal Teshuva, is the owner of that answer of return, as it were. And I was raised Reform, but my mother was raised very religious. And there were a lot of remnants of her orthodoxy in my childhood. So I think I actually got kind of a mixed, experience. Like we had 2 sets of dishes, but I didn't know why. I thought it was just like breakfast dishes and dinner dishes.
Yeah.
But sometimes we would have tuna fish for dinner and she'd serve it on the breakfast dishes. And I didn't understand. Now I do. We had 2 sets of dishes.
Yeah.
And I also grew up in a very, my grandparents immigrated from Eastern Europe during the series of pogroms, leading up to the Holocaust. So my mom's parents in particular lost, most of their family. And so like the Holocaust was like right here. That's how I describe it. It was like right here. So like they were Yiddish speakers. My mom did not speak English in her home of origin. I was raised with Yiddish. I spoke Yiddish to my children. Wow. I grew up in like a very shtetl-y kind of, home. because my mom's parents lived like survivors, and they lived in a community of Holocaust survivors, even though they were not, in camps. But that was just like that culture.
Yeah.
So the notion of taking on observance was very scary to my mom, because she's like, you're going to be religious, just like my sister who moved to Israel, because my mom's older sister, became more religious and made Aliyah when I was born. And
I get that parental fear.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's like you want them to love their Jewish identity, but not so much that they move thousands of miles away from you.
Oh, you think you're so hot? You celebrate Shabbos? Like, oh, I'm not good enough for you? And, it was like a little of that for many years. But yeah, I took on observance in college. I had, as I said, a very, traditional wedding, and I was, quite observant for the years that my kids were young. And then I got divorced when my kids were 4 and 7, and it was much harder. There's not really a place for divorced Orthodox women with young children in Jewish communities, meaning it's like you're kind of an odd, it's like, do you get invited to places with couples? Like, that's sad. And like, if you're not looking to be dating right away, it's just like a little bit of a...
It seems like an oversight.
It's like a liminal space. Yeah, I think that like unmarried Jewish women is like a very special category, but in particular, like being divorced and with kids, like it's very different.
It's got to describe a lot of women.
Yes. Oh, I know. Yeah.
I know many too.
Well, especially like when you age out of like the 20s and 30s,
right.
Then it's like, oh, now I'm this lady. I think that's...
We gotta plug that gap.
I mean, I think it's very, very, very interesting. Yeah.
All right. Let's get to this game. We're going to do a good old-fashioned lightning round. I know you speak Yiddish, as you've mentioned. What's one of your favorite Yiddish words or phrases?
Verschimmelt.
What's verschimmelt?
Verschimmelt is when you open a fruit and it's kind of mealy but also dry. It's not just mealy, it's also dry. That's verschimmelt.
Wow, I can't believe there's a word for that.
Why wouldn't there be?
That's so specific.
Because otherwise you'd have to say it's kind of mealy but a little bit dry. And it's like, is it rotten? It's verschimmelt.
Verschimmelt. What's one of your most memorable or unique experiences davening on the road?
Ooh, davening on the road. What a great question. The year that I said Kaddish for my father, I did the full year.
Yeah.
And I was once in Savannah for, it was a speaking engagement. And what I always would do during my year of Kaddish, because the most reliable place to say Kaddish on a weekday is an Orthodox shul,
sure.
I ended up going to Orthodox shuls a lot, mostly. And also I'm pretty observant, so like that's fine. But they often don't allow women to say Kaddish, or it can be complicated. So I would always alert them. Savannah, Georgia. They are so unaccustomed to having women at their weekday minchas that there was no women's section. So I was placed in a refreshment corner off the main synagogue room.
Okay.
And the mechitza they created, and I'm not saying this to tell a bad story about Orthodox people, they did it as lovingly as they could. They put a cart, like a library cart of books as the mechitza to try and create.
Would you duck down behind that, please?
But honestly, then I recited Kaddish. It was fine. But they literally were like, we have to improvise. And like, we don't have a women's section because like there's never a woman here. And so they made this little alcove, my mechitza section.
Okay. That's certainly unique and memorable.
That's what you asked.
What was the most Jewish moment on The Big Bang Theory?
We lit candles together on Hanukkah.
Oh, that's nice.
And like, I would put the word out. It would usually be, if it happened on a tape night, we would do it between dinner and touch-ups before the show, and we would all gather. Cast members who wanted to, producers, crew, and it was really beautiful, and we would all sing together.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
If you made Aliyah, what city would you live in?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'd want to live in the middle of the old city.
Special place.
I would want to live in one of those like weird, windy, crazy little streets. I mean, I could also imagine living in Sfat, like, of the places I've been.
Spiritual place.
Oh, and just like it's, on the hill and just that region. And actually, I have family in Hoshaya, which is near there, which is also lovely. But there's something about living in like a place that feels ancient. Like I don't want to live in like a new building. I want to live in an ancient place.
Cool. What's your favorite Jewish holiday?
I'm a person that gets a lot out of like Tisha B'Av, like fasting.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's definitely, you're
cut.
definitely the first answer to be
cut.
that.
It's a deep cut.
Saddest day of the year for this gal.
Okay, but like saddest and also the potential for redemption.
Sure.
And, a day of like true immersion. Mm-hmm. The only other one you could compare it to is Yom Kippur.
Right.
Not just because of the not eating, but when you don't eat, you can't expend a lot of energy. So you're spending the day immersed, you know? And I really, that's a thing.
Do you have a favorite parsha?
I love a Jewish question.
Yeah.
I get so many of them here. You know, I'm Vayigash was my bat mitzvah parsha.
Okay.
And like Joseph revealing himself to his brothers is very, very special. It's special on, you know, so many levels. Like, what does it mean to be seen also by your family? What happens when we change? Do people recognize us, right? What's it like to reintroduce yourself to people? I mean, like, just like it's so many things.
that.
I'm a super Jew nerd, in case you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. If you could have any 3 Jews, dead or alive, over for Shabbat dinner, who would they be?
My partner, Jonathan Cohen.
Nice.
Just, you know.
He's got to be there.
He's got to be there. I mean, it's hard not to have my kids, but like
They're already invited.
Okay, fine.
These are three Ushpizin.
My partner, Jonathan Cohen. I think we'll make him one. You know, Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud.
It's a hell of a dinner table conversation.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking like, oh, there's so many ladies like Golda Meir. Like, there's so many incredible Jewish women, like Hannah Senesh. Like, there's so many incredible women. But like, I think like Einstein, Freud. I mean, also you could throw Marx in there and kick out my boyfriend. But you know,
that'd be a really interesting conversation. And my last question that we ask of all of our guests: challah, rip or slice?
Oh my goodness, it's not even ripping. It's called knipping. That's the Yiddish.
That's Yiddish for rip? Is knip?
It's a knip.
You're the first knip we've had. We had a lot of rips, not a knip.
Knip, and also the best part is the kepi, the end, the head. Some people call it the heel, but in my house we called it the kepi.
Love that. Mayim, thank you so much.
Delightful. Thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave me your thoughts in the comments. We talked about a lot of stuff. Would love to hear your feedback. And I want you to try something. Share this episode with someone you think might find it interesting. If you're a Jew, send it to an ally. If you're an ally, send it to a Jew. I predict good things will happen. And if I'm right, find the clip from this episode on Instagram or TikTok and let me know. I'll be waiting for you. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you right back here for the next episode of Being Jewish with me, Jonah Platt. Thanks again to our sponsor, Wondering Jews with Michal and Noam, an Unpacked podcast. Start watching or listening at unpacked.bio/WJ.